Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. On this week's episode, we are going to cover how to replace your fuel lines. So we've been getting a lot of questions about how we do it, or what kind of hose you use, what kind of crimps or clamps, zip ties, whatever. So today we're gonna go over that in detail. Since spring/summer is right around the corner, we know you guys are gonna wanna get out there and start riding. And we figured this would be helpful for most of you out there. So we're gonna walk you through on how, well, not me, but how Jarman does it. And we'll go from there.
Like Nick said, today we're gonna show you how to do fuel lines. If you have gray fuel lines still, it is highly recommended to replace them. They cause green goo, not glue. It's kind of gluey. I'm sure you've seen it on the forums or the Facebook pages or whatever, but it's, like I said, get rid of those right away. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove our bin, obviously, and then we're gonna go to our sender. I will have Nick zoom the camera in 1 second, but what I do is I take a Sharpie, and on the sender, there is RET, which is return, and on, a VET, which is vent, the vent's on this side, below it, we'll show you. And then the other one is RES, which is reserve. So it's the lowest setting in the tank when you get to you better get back to the dock level. So, like I said, I'm gonna grab a Sharpie. I'm going to kind of like color over it so I can see it, it's more visible. And then we're gonna take them off line by line. It's the easiest way to do it. After this video, you'll be able to do it like freehand. You won't have to take them off line by line because there's nowhere to go. But let's do that, and then we'll remove our actual valve, which controls the on, off, and reserve, and we'll get to it. All right, so we took one I had laying around so we can show you better. It's just too dark inside the hull. So what I do is I kind of just buzz over this so I can see it. And then if you wipe it, it'll give you like a nice outlay. So like RET is your return, like I was saying. Buzz over this, give you an outline. ON is on. VEN, vent. RES, reserve. So the marker helps me a little bit. I mean, you don't have to do it if you have good visibility inside the hull, but that is what we were talking about. Everything is labeled where your lines exactly go. So we will move on to showing you how to remove the valve and kind of like what the positions are on the valve. All right, so we're gonna remove this valve first so we can get to all of our fuel lines, because we need to just kind of push it into the hull to loosen everything. It's a little tight. So this is just a rubber cap. You should be able to grab your nail and pull it out. Sometimes it's recessed in, so you might be able to use a small flathead. Just be careful so you don't damage it. And then inside of it, it's gonna go all the way to the reserve side. Inside of it is a Phillips screw. So you remove the Phillips screw, and then sometimes the knob is a little hard to remove. And you can use, yeah, like we might have to use it on this one. You can use a flathead, but kind of work your way around it, because if you do it in one spot, you're gonna end up putting marks in here. Like here, we didn't even go here yet. Somebody's already taken this out before, and there's like kind of marks here. They're not huge, but they would bother me. So if you're gonna use a flathead screwdriver to get it out, just kind of work your way around it. Very, very light prying, otherwise you'll damage this, and they don't make these new, so you'd have to go use one. Next, I don't have the proper socket for this, so I always just take nail nose and kind of go on the edges of it. Wash your fingers, because you know when the nail nose slips off and pinches your finger, then you're gonna be cursing us. But this is the way I do it. This is the half-ass way. With how many of these I do, I should really just get a socket, but whatever. So this pops off, right? And then you're gonna push your valve inside so that you have access to all your fuel lines, and you can drape it out and undo them. This is our new control valve. We're just gonna show you out of the boat, just because, again, it's dark in there, it's harder for you to see. So on the valve, just like on the actual sender, it has everything labeled. So here's RES, reserve, here's out, and here's on. So the out, you'll see when we show you inside, the out is going to go to your filter, which is like underneath kind of where your seat bracket's at. So the out goes to the filter, and then from the filter, it goes to your carburetors. And then the reserve goes to the reserve on your sender, and the on goes to the on your sender. So we're gonna pull that out now, and then I'll show you what I do for lines. Wow, this is nasty. All right, so there's our old valve, it's gonna go right in the garbage. I'm not cleaning it or rebuilding it, there's no point. The new valves are on OSD Marine, which is osdparts.com. They're like 25 bucks. So just do that when you're ordering your carburetor kit, because obviously if you're replacing your fuel lines at this point, you should 100% rebuild your carburetors if you haven't already. And if you need to know how to rebuild your carburetors, we have a video for that too. It's pretty in-depth, and you should have no issues rebuilding your carburetors instead of sending them out. So now that we have that valve out, we're going to do what I just said. We're going to do a 1-by-1 swap. So pick whichever line you want, trace it down to where it goes, undo it from the sender or the filter, wherever it is, and then we'll pull it out of the boat and I'll show you my method, which I'm sure you already know by now. You just match them up and cut them, but we'll go through it. Sometimes when you go to remove them from the sender, since it's plastic and it's been crimped for however long, they're like just very, very hard to get off. So instead of applying a lot of pressure and pulling it off the sender, which you could damage it, take a razor blade and very, very, very lightly score the fuel line until it's a split. Just make sure you don't get the actual fitting. So take your time with it. Don't just go in there full force and try to cut it so you can pull it off. Score past your fuel line, and then you should be able to just bend it right off of it. Again, if you put pressure on the actual sender and you somehow crack like the actual barb or something like that, you're not gonna know it until you start leaking. So I'm gonna go in here with light pressure, pull it off, and then we'll show you how to cut lines. This is our on fuel line. It goes from the sender that says on to the on the actual valve, obviously. As you can tell, this is a very hard, brittle line. So we're just gonna compare them. We're gonna line them up. You're gonna have to kind of force it with your hand, carry it down, and then it's gonna wanna recoil back on you, right? So you can't cut it like that. So you're just gonna have to kind of walk it down, apply pressure, and then I cut them a little bit big. So I'll go like, I don't know, 1/2 inch or so past it. So then that's my new line. For lines, we're using Pro 1. These are found on Amazon. I've used them for a lot of years. I've never had any problems with them. We'll link it down below. It's like 20 bucks for this entire spool and it'll do your whole boat. So next, if you want to just like start removing all your lines, which if you've never done this before, I wouldn't really recommend it. You can and start cutting them all, and then you would have to label them, but we're just gonna swap them one for one. So we're gonna do one line at a time. Like I said, this is our on, so we'll put it back on our on, then we'll move on to the next one, cut the line the same way, and then when we get to the filter and stuff like that, I'll show you guys some replacements that need to be done to the filter. You've seen them in the videos before, but these are called single ear clamps, and this is the tool to pinch them all together. So for that line size, the outside diameter, and calculating it with the actual barb going through it to not pinch it to crimp it off, you need a 14.5. We'll put this in the description so you can order everything off Amazon. It's easy peasy for you, but this is what I use on the lines that are on and off on occasion. So they'd be like going to your carburetors, like the inlet and probably the return. These are pretty difficult to get off. So on those, we're gonna use regular single like screw clamps, worm clamps. But for all the sending unit and the filter and the valve and everything else, I use single ear clamps. So if you don't have these, I would highly recommend getting them, because if you are doing fuel lines with zip ties, it is incredibly wrong. It was not done that way from the factory, and it does not hold the fuel line on correctly. So don't be a boner and use either a worm clamp, which at some point, if you tighten it too much, the worm clamp can go through the actual casing to where it'll create a slit in the line. But single ear clamps is the best because it does not pinch the line to where it's actually cutting through the line. So that's what we're gonna use. So I'm gonna go through and I'm going to replace everything up to my filter, and then I'll show you guys some filter maintenance, and then I think we'll put something on the floor to kind of show you like a full diagram out of the ski, so that it's not, you have like a visual picture in case you get somehow lost in the video. It's just easier that way to describe it to you guys.
Lost in the sauce.
Lost in the sauce, there you go. All right, so this is the filter. It's found on a bracket that is directly underneath this seat post bracket. It's not post, but the bracket. It's 3 parts to the assembly. It's the actual housing, the filter itself, and there's an O-ring. So the O-ring can get deteriorated over time because these are from the 90s, don't forget. So OSD sells a full filter kit. I just have a new O-ring for it, but they sell a full filter kit where you have a brand new filter and the O-ring. I highly recommend you to spend the $12 or whatever it costs from OSD to buy this kit, because you need this O-ring. The O-ring sits inside of the channel on the filter housing. Make sure it goes all the way inside of the channel. It's nice and pressed in, right? And then you're just gonna put it back up in and screw it tight. Don't over tighten it because you can cut through the actual O-ring. But this can cause problems to where, like, if you just take this out and you clean it and you call it good and you leave the old O-ring on there, because it's been pressed on for so long, if it doesn't have a proper seal, you're gonna get air being drawn in to where it might, like if you go to start a dry system, you pull the choke, if it's pulling in air, you'll never get fuel to your carburetors. So spend the extra money since you're gonna order a new valve anyways and not clean it like a jamoke, and buy the filter kit along with the carb rebuild kit, obviously. So this is done. I cleaned out the whole inside of this. Again, if you're not getting a new filter and you're just getting a new O-ring, you can clean this. Obviously, there's nothing wrong if you just clean it, but don't use any type of chemical on here. If you spray like carburetor cleaner or something on this, this will just disintegrate. So just rinse it off with water, kind of like, you know, real lightly with your finger, just massage the debris and stuff out of it, and then let it air dry. Don't blow it, because it's very, very fragile. So we'll install this, and then we will show you a diagram on the floor, and we'll also show you couple fuel lines with the carbs, which should be pretty self-explanatory, but we'll show you anyways. Oh. We'll show you these out of the ski just because you're gonna have to pull these anyways to do these lines, and it's easier to show you out of it. So this is the inlet for your fuel on the back side, which would be the top side. The link together here is for, so your fuel comes into your mag carburetor, transfers over to the PTO carburetor. That's how the PTO gets its fuel. And then your tops are your returns. So your return comes and tees off before it goes back to your sender for the return. When you pull these apart, obviously you're gonna make sure that they're dead nuts on length, because if they're not, when you go to put them back on, they're not gonna bolt up right. But make sure that you check this plastic fitting, because this is obviously from the 90s, and these get brittle and start to deteriorate and crack. So when you pull apart the actual clamps, inspect it to make sure, maybe like put some water in it and cap off the bottom, make sure it doesn't come out or anything like that, or like this one just definitely gonna get replaced because it's all nasty. But these, well, it's not nasty, but it's bent. You see the bend in there? Can you see in the camera?
A little bit.
Yeah. All right, so they also sell these on OSD Marine. Pick up a new one if you don't have faith in yours. And then the only thing left, which doesn't really have to do with fuel lines, obviously somebody hodgepodge this one together, is your pulser. So if you pull your carbs and you do all this stuff and then you put it back together and it's not working, double check it, because if you don't hook up this pulse line, this is the fuel pump. There's a diaphragm in here, and from the vacuum of the engine, it pumps and pulls fuel in. This is, most of the time, this is like a pre-bent line. You can replace this line. It doesn't have to be a factory pre-bent one. Just make sure that you have a nice sweeping bend on it, so that it's getting, I mean, this is the wrong way to do it, but when you replace it, do a nice sweeping bend, not a tight radius on it, and it'll be perfectly fine. I would highly recommend to replace it and not use your one from the 90s. So that's your carburetors, and as I said before, it's highly recommended to rebuild your carburetors. These are disgusting. We have a whole video on how to do it, and the parts are also LSD. So if you've already gone this far, just rebuild them. And then there's the green goo we were talking about. Can you see it in the camera?
Oh, let's see. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So we'll pull one of the lines off and we'll show you the green goo so you can see it first person. But
the goo,
that's what we're talking about. This is the gray fuel line. Oh, here we go.
Oh, let's see. And a little bit.
All right. Well, it's green. It's gooey, and the community calls it green goo. So
like flubber.
If you have gray lines, like flubber, dude. If you have gray lines, get flubber out of your life. Carbs. Get flubber out of your life and do your fuel lines.
Oh. What are you drawing?
A board so we can teach the class.
Oh, today's class is in session.
Yeah.
Fuel Lines 101 with Professor Nikki Jarman.
Yeah.
Are you thirsty?
Oh. Thanks, bro.
Yes. See, I do more than just film. I'm Nick's personal assistant.
My teaching assistant.
Yes.
All right, so since it's so hard to see inside the hull, we decided to draw this out for you so you kind of have some type of diagram, and then we'll take a picture and kind of leave it in there for a couple seconds so you can screenshot or whatever you want to do with it, because I know that we're at an angle and it's a little bit hard to see. But the explanation should be able to help you more than us filming a dark hall. So you have your
carbs, filter, sender, valve.
All right, so on your sender, you have your RES, which is your reserve. So your reserve is gonna come out and into your reserve on the valve. Then you have your on. Your on's gonna come out and into the on the valve. Then on your valve, you have out. So you're gonna have out goes to the in on the filter, right? We'll do a little line so you can see where it breaks. And then your out on the filter is going to go to your carburetors. That's your little 90-degree fitting on the carburetors. This towards the bottom of the hull. Like we showed you on the carbs earlier in the video, you have a link that feeds from your mag carburetor to feed your PTO carburetor. And then you have 2 lines that come off into a T, which is your return. So check that return T, because sometimes it's a brittle plastic from the 90s and it'll crack. You can get the brand new one on an OSD Marine. So your reserve is gonna come out on your reserve and your return is gonna come out of your carbs and into your return, your RET on the sender. So the only thing you have left is your valve. Now your vent. So your vent is on the port side of the hull, which is on your left side if you're sitting on it. So it's gonna come out of the vent, it's gonna come up to the bars where you have like that little vent, it's like a rubber little mushroom vent, and then it's gonna tee back down and it's gonna come out into the hull with a one-way check valve, right? Make sure you pay attention to which way that check valve is going. There's an arrow on it. Make sure it's pointing towards out the hull, and then it goes into that fitting. Now that one-way check valve is pressed into the fitting, pull it straight out. It's gonna be a little bit hard. You're gonna feel like you're gonna break it. You're not gonna break it, just pull it straight out. So this pretty much is an exact diagram that should be right inside the hull, just much easier to see. If you follow along with this and the way that we show you how to cut lines, you should be able to cut them the perfect length and put all your lines back to how they're supposed to be. Woohoo!
All right, guys, we hope you enjoyed that video. It was pretty straight to the point, at least we feel like it was. Originally, we were gonna try to film inside the hull and show you guys how we actually ran the lines, but this thing's pretty much assembled, as you can see behind me, so there's really not much room to fit this camera and lights in there, so that's kind of why we went over that diagram for you. We will post a picture or a screenshot of that image as well, so you guys can reference it while you're doing this. And as far as reinstalling the valve, just work backwards. The way you took it off is the way to put it back on. But basically that concludes today's video. Again, we hope that was short and sweet and easy to the point. If you guys do have any questions, just drop a comment below or send us an email. And yeah, that's basically it. So we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.